Sorry, not really sure what happened there.
You might find everyone's dialing back in.
Yeah, people dialing back in. I think the Hyperledger Foundation person left. Normally it's a bot that records the meeting.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe Enrique, if you can remember who that was, maybe follow up with them offline.
Yeah. Okay, I'll share my screen again and we can carry on.
Sorry, Chan.
That's all right.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so to just continue, we've re-established the interface that is more powerful so that the transaction handler itself have more control and access to the transaction database. We need to perform complex logic that to have a better transaction management logic of gas station API. All of those are reflected on the FireFly transaction manager documentation. So if you're interested, do take a look. And also there are a few contributors from the Discord as well, start contributing on the transaction manager layer, which is very good to see. So if you have any ideas and want to pick up any new issues in those repos, do come and let us know. We'll give you help if you need.
Awesome. Anything else there? I think also substantial work went into the FireFly performance CLI to be able to run those performance tests across the transaction manager and be able to find those bottlenecks there. All right. Next one, Tezos connector. I believe we did have a maintainer of the connector, but I think they might have dropped. So yeah, new Tezos connector created by 2 new maintainers to FireFly. It builds on top of the blockchain toolkit, and yeah, it's a really interesting connector. Tezos is a very different chain to some of the ones we've seen before, and the specialty of this connector is that it includes a remote transaction signing. So it's capable of integrating with what's called a signatory, and this signatory has different abilities to sign using different key management solutions like AWS key management solutions or Azure key management solutions, and be able to submit transactions to this Tezos chain. Unfortunately, we don't have any of the maintainers, but I wanted to get a feel on them. But yeah, it's great to see how FireFly is entering new ecosystems, and I'm sure there'll be more collaboration there in the future. And there's a webinar I can link to where we went to the Tezos community and we run a FireFly presentation that Nico ran a few months ago. Awesome. Those were the biggest contributions, but I think there was other substantial contributions that made the ecosystem a lot better as a whole. I think one of them were last year we did batching of delivery events for subscriptions. This was for webhooks and WebSockets. So this was to increase the throughput. When you're listening to events from FireFly, you can now receive batches of events, and you can configure your batch size and how often and how much you want to read ahead. And it will work with all your filtering capabilities that already exist in the subscription layer. We also enhanced the API. We added a new enhancement to the events API that Sam added to do additional filtering for events. One substantial change that you will see in the migration guide is that we've separated define and publish for token pools and contract interfaces. So when you create a token pool in FireFly, and that FireFly has been enabled in multi-party mode, by default, before 1.3, that token pool would be published to the other members of the network. And the same would happen with contract interfaces, right? The contract APIs that drive the contract APIs. Now there's a separation where you can define your token pool, and if it hasn't been published, you can still delete it from your local FireFly node. Once you've published it, that will get broadcasted to the other members of the multi-party network, and you won't be able to delete it again, because at that point there will be a transaction on chain for those artifacts. We also did a lot of work to do database optimizations, so inserting batches of events in one database operation in FireFly, That was again for the push towards better performance. Andrew recently had the ability to cancel batch stuck in dispatch. So before you sometimes, so batches are a concept in FireFly where we group together a set of off-chain and on-chain coordination. And in a batch, you could have one batch pin operation, and you can have an amount of off-chain coordination, private messages or broadcast messages. And sometimes if you're never going to receive that off-chain data, that batch can get stuck, and there was no way for you to very easily clear that batch, and it would be stuck in pending. So as part of the improvement proposal 17, we've had the ability to be able to cancel that batch in the case where it's stuck. Along with that, we upgraded Golang, we fixed loads of CVEs across many repos, especially the token connectors that are JavaScript based. And as we mentioned, we did a lot of best improvements, not only around performance, but also around revert reasoning that Matt wrote a document on that, and also handling receipts better. And I think there's a lot more work in that area for the future.
And just to be clear, the CVE was dependencies, not CVEs in FireFly.
Correct, yes, these were all dependencies pulled in by the different repositories. Finally, I wanted to mention a little bit about the migration concerns. We've written a whole guide for migration. Two of the important ones is Docker image permissions have changed. So if you are going to upgrade to 1.3 and you're running this in a Dockerized environment or in a Kubernetes environment, you have noticed that we've added different permissions to our Docker files, different users. So it might not run with the default configuration that you have. So we have a guide on which images and how you'd be able to change that. Finally, what I mentioned earlier, the fact that now contract interfaces and APIs and token pools have a distinct step when you create them, and by default they're unpublished. And you will have to either pass in a parameter to publish them when you create them, or there's an API to publish them afterwards. And as always, please join the Discord, and activity on GitHub is really good. I'm monitoring the Discord every day, so feel free to post messages there and contribute. I've also started triaging issues on GitHub around good first issues for contributors. So if you know anyone or you feel like you want to come along and pick up issues, just feel free to message me on Discord or even tag me in the issue, and we can make that happen. Okay, any other questions on the 1.3 updates or any other remarks?
So maybe just maybe it's this section, or maybe I'm moving on to the next topic, but just thinking about things that didn't make it into 1.3 that are still ongoing. We talked about sort of, rather than thinking in this session, I don't think we're going to have like thinking out big next things, but stuff that's just on the 1.3 journey. We talked about the journey of active HA and closing that out, that like we can see the end in sight there. There was another piece of work that didn't quite make the cut, but expecting to go in, which was the ability to subscribe to lots of different blockchain events in one group. And it allows you to be sure that you're going to get absolute ordering. It's like a contract between Core and the blockchain connector, that you will get absolute ordering on the blockchain across all of those different event types. So that's something that I think it's sort of like 3/4 of the way there, but we just didn't block 1.3.4. So I know that one's in flight. Trying to think, what else is there, Enrique? Can you think of any others that were sort of notable, didn't quite make it, that might be coming in a point release?
I was just going to mention one that came out around custom error handling, Peter.
Yes.
So we discussed on the previous contributor call that we didn't have clear docs. I don't think we had docs at all, really, which talked about how errors coming back from the Besu node, if it's a Besu node under the covers, are parsed and or handled. And we know that there is a gap there around custom errors in terms of the actual functionality and the option in FireFly to, if you have the API for the error, to decode them completely. So we did do the kind of docs part of that to make sure we comprehensively describe in the docs all of the places where errors can come back and how they're decoded and what you will see based on what you have enabled on your Besu node. We also disabled the use of the kind of fairly heavyweight debug trace transaction function by default to avoid that causing issues on a production chain. But I think there was one item left, which was to decode custom errors in FireFly when the API is available.
Yeah, I think the one I think that's going to come soon is also multi-party status. I think we're working towards that, around making the experience for registering multi-party and making sure that the status is more clear for users. There's also an open API change that I have to make the open APIs more concise as well, as part of the FireFlies that I think will make the next cut, hopefully. Yeah, I also want to mention, I didn't have a slide on this, but I'll share an issue. We did a lot of performance testing in this release. I think Nico and I spent weeks performance testing and running the Perf CLI, and we did discover a performance bug in the transaction manager that we fixed for 1.3. So yeah, that is substantial. There is a lot of documentation around the numbers we got, the rough idea of the performance running FireFly there. But yeah, it's a good steer here. I think maybe in the next community call we should talk about what's next and what's the things in the horizon for our next release. All right. One other thing I wanted to show is the new doc site. So Hyperledger has given us a template for documentation. Nico has built our website and has changed the way the GitHub actions work in order to build this new template and the new fonts and all of that and the new themes. It should have the same content as before. We still have the head where we have the docs built from the main branch, and we did cut a 1.3 documentation. And yeah, please let me know if you have any problems with the documentation. If you go through it, just raise an issue or tag me on Discord, and we can take a look at that. And as I mentioned earlier, if you go on the release notes, there is a 1.3 migration guide that was written by Nico and Sam around different considerations for migration that we spoke about today. Awesome. I'll stop share there, and we can move on to any topics that the community want to raise. Okay, I don't think there's anything there. I did see the message on the chat. Thanks, Matt, for that. Around the Sean, I'll reach out to him, and then I will see how we can get the 2 recordings and published into the community code notes. Okay, if there's nothing else there, I'll close the call. Thanks everyone for attending today.
Thanks, Enrique.
Cheers, guys.